Good evening and welcome to the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Peter, Minnesota. It is Monday, October 14th, 2024. At 7:02 p.m. we are called to order. Would all please rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First up tonight is the approval of the agenda. We have one addition to the agenda that was distributed. Everybody should have received a copy of the memo and the resolution approving purchase of 53 IV pumps for Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic.
Madam Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, we'd like that, if that could come after item I.
All right, after item I. Are there any other revisions, corrections, questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as revised?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Next up, approval of the minutes. The minutes appear on pages 7 through 10 of the packet. Are there any revisions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing nothing, is there a motion to approve the minutes as distributed?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. We, as usual, have time on our agenda for visitor comments. Is there any visitor who'd like to address the council on any agenda item? Hearing none, we also have time for general visitor comments. Is there any visitor who'd like to address the council on any matter whatsoever? Hearing none, we will move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Oh, we have a public hearing.
Yep.
We are going to move on to the public hearing. Let's see. Can you help me find the page on that? That is page
40 through 88.
Page 40 through 88.
And Madam Mayor, Shannon Sweetie from David Drown Associates is here to help us along with this one.
Thanks for coming tonight, Shannon.
Thanks for having me. Good evening, Shannon Sweeney with David Drown Associates here for the public hearing on the creation of Tax Increment Financing District number 1-27. Start with a brief overview. Tax increment financing is an economic development tool that allows us to capture new property taxes associated with new development for a period of time. State statute has been modified over the years to include a whole bunch of restrictions on what we can and can't do with those funds. But at the end of the day, this is a proposed housing TIF district, and we can spend 95% of those revenues in support of housing projects, which we're intending to do. Within those housing projects, up to 20% of the square footage of the project can be dedicated for commercial use, which in this instance, we do have a component of commercial use proposed on the main level of the structure, but it is well within that 20% requirement. Ultimately, the developer, BRM Holdings LLC, has requested assistance in the form of reimbursement of that property tax for a period of up to 14 years or an amount not to exceed $384,613. That number is based on a projection of the market value, which the assessor provided to us. The county assessor evaluated the preliminary plans for the project. We apply the current tax rate in order to establish both a cap on the amount and the duration or the term of reimbursement that's being proposed. Under state statute, the developer is required to meet specific income requirements. All but one project we've worked on has been, the developer has selected the requirement of having 20% of the units available for folks at 50% of area median income by family size. And so ultimately we expect that's, and the agreement was drafted and such, with such a restriction provided. If you choose to proceed, there'll be two actions that are, well, one action, I'm sorry, before you, but it has two provisions within it. One is to adopt the tax increment plan, which creates this mechanism at 107 West Nassau Street, or the former library lot. And that same resolution that you'll be asked to consider Also authorizes execution of the tax increment financing agreement that provides the amount of assistance that I just referenced. Ultimately, the developer is required to certify to the city on at least an annual basis that they are meeting the income restrictions that are imposed by state statute. And if they do not, we're not able to provide them with tax increment financing assistance. The developer must pay the property tax before anything is reimbursed. So we're not coming out of pocket with anything we don't actually receive that's captured as tax increment. Ultimately, what we're doing is foregoing the benefit of this new tax base for a period of time in order to get a project constructed on the old library lot. And so with that, we have a tax increment plan which references a lot of the stuff I just talked about. It establishes a budget, the boundaries for the TIF district, which are just the property at 107 West Nassau Street. So that's the only location where we're going to be capturing tax increment within this TIF district. And we also had a draft of a development agreement in your packet, for which, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to authorize execution if you choose to proceed and adopt the resolution that's been provided following the public hearing. So happy to answer your questions.
Anything to add or any questions?
No, ma'am.
So as you mentioned, we will take action on this later in the meeting unless there are any questions right now. We will close the public hearing at 7:09.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sharon.
All right, moving on to approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins with a memo on page 11 of the packet and includes with a resolution that appears on pages 40 and 41 of the packet. The consent agenda includes the following employee appointment: Mariah Seller as a lab technician at a wage of $32.89 an hour. The following individuals appointed as election judges for the City of St. Peter for August and November 2024 elections. The following individuals are hereby appointed to the following boards and commissions: Connie Baumgartner to the Parks and Recreation Board for a term ending December 31st, 2024. We have 3 temporary licenses to approve: a temporary gambling license to Nicollet County Pheasants Forever for 10/24/24, show licenses to the Flame Bar 10/1/2024 through 12/31/2024, and Tremendous Brewery for the same term, a radiator flushing at the Broadway Generation Facility to be approved, and the schedule of disbursements for September 19th, 2024 through October 9th, 2024. Is there any discussion or questions regarding any agenda or any item on the consent agenda? Brad?
And I see Pete's not here, so I don't know if Curtis or someone else can answer this one. Just on the radiator flushing, I see later in the agenda, we're actually replacing a radiator on one of the generators. Is this radiator flushing supposed to essentially be preventive maintenance to help avoid a similar situation in the future?
Yes, but I can't speak to whether that was done in advance on the unit that is asked
Oh, sure.
for repairs later in the meeting.
Yeah, I was just curious if this is something that we're looking at. Maybe this is an investment now to avoid a similar situation in the future.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion regarding the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the resolution approving the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Weisenfeld.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
The resolution is approved, and although I did not read the names of all of the election judges, I think we should all give them our thanks. It's a wonderful job that they do for us. We will move on to we have no items of unfinished business tonight. Our first item of new business is the adoption of a resolution approving the establishment of tax increment financing district number 1-27 and authorizing execution of a development agreement with BRM Holdings, Inc. And Shannon's here again. Yes, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I will spare Shannon having to explain it one more time. Just the question I have, for clarification for people who will say, well, this looks like we're giving a tax break and the city is losing out on tax resources. For tax increment financing, anything that's currently being collected on the property stays as is. In this property, we're probably not collecting anything anyways, correct?
Correct.
But actually, just state statute requires the county to carry an underlying value on that property, and when this district is created, that underlying value will now create a tax because it'll be considered residential property at this point, and that tax won't be captured. So will actually receive a little bit of benefited tax base as a result of this falling under private development, so.
But otherwise, in this situation, the city isn't losing out on anything because in situations such as this, the developer often won't actually do the building without the tax increment financing.
That's
correct?
part of the findings that have to be made, and ultimately, it's, that's correct, yes.
So yeah, so just so people understand, this is a tax neutral thing. The city isn't losing out on any tax revenue.
Not that we wouldn't otherwise,
Yeah.
Without TIF assistance, the project wouldn't proceed. The city's owned that vacant lot for a number of years, long time, since I used to be an employee. Which was a long time ago.
How many years? My gosh, yeah.
And so ultimately, much like municipal parking lot number 5, we've waited a long time and it's taken some assistance in order to promote development on those properties.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have do you have a presentation, or you're just here for questions?
Here for questions, same information that presented in the public hearing. Ultimately, the action item before you is the resolution that adopts the TIF plan and authorizes execution of the development agreement, which provides assistance to BRM Holdings based on them constructing a new housing facility that has less than 20% commercial space, pays their property taxes on time and in full, meets the income requirements that are imposed by statute, and if they do those things, will reimburse their property tax for a term of up to 14 years, or an amount not to exceed $384,613.
Anything to add, Todd?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, any questions or comments? Hearing nothing further, the resolution approving the establishment of a tax increment financing district number 1-27 within Municipal Development District number 1, and the adoption of the tax increment financing plan relating thereto, and authorizing execution of a development agreement with BRM Holdings, Inc. appears on pages 87 through 90 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sharstrom.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld.
The resolution's approved.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sharon.
All right, our next item of new business is the adoption of a resolution authorizing Bolton and Menk, Inc. to assist in the selection of a construction manager at risk, CMAR.
Madam Mayor, members, the information is included in your packet, starting on page 89 or 91, depending on what version you have, and we're working through. This is really to provide assistance to city staff in selection of construction manager at risk. You've used this type of construction process on numerous projects in the past, including some of the biggest projects that you have. We found it to be very beneficial and cost effective. This would help establish that process for selection of that CMAR or construction manager at risk. The resolution's included in your packet to engage Bolton and Mink to provide assistance in this area. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have more specifically about the CMAR process or engaging Bolton and Mink. You'll also see as a part of the memo and the resolution that there's a time frame to move this forward. And as you may recall, this is not for the construction of a new wastewater treatment plant. This is really for change out of the equipment that's now 20+ years old. And as you have heard on numerous occasions and seen report previously about upgrades that will be needed and equipment that needs to be changed out due to the age and the really harsh conditions that they live and work under, this is part of that process in moving forward. Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions that folks might have about this one.
Questions for Todd? Brad?
I just want to say thank you for explaining that this is just for basically the updates and upgrades versus the actual replacement of the facility.
Yeah, and I'm even hesitant to say updates or upgrades, although I think I said upgrades once. This really has to do with replacing equipment that now is 20+ years old. And again, it works in a very harsh conditions. And without the ability to see that equipment move, work, treat waste for you, you can't meet the compliance rules, and certainly that isn't within the goals that are set to ensure that we are taking care of sustainability efforts in the Minnesota River, which is part of the reason you have this wastewater treatment plant to begin with.
Well, and we as a council, we all did a tour of the wastewater treatment. When did we do that? Last winter? Yeah.
It still sticks with me, the smell sticks with me, Curtis.
But our staff do a wonderful job maintaining, getting the best life out of equipment and facilities, but it is time.
It's time.
It is time. Daryl?
Couple questions. Bolton and Mink won't be the construction manager, correct?
That is correct.
So this is an amount to help the city select a construction manager firm or construction management firm, correct?
That's correct. And a couple of things, if I could add on to that. I think this is a really important process, and we like the balance that this type of process provides as a part of the construction. And it's not just the construction. It really is operational efficiency and ability to operate appropriately in that, I'll pick on engineers just a smidge. Especially with water and wastewater facilities, they have an idea about how this is supposed to work and what equipment's supposed to be in place. But having someone who has some experience in how this operationally works can find efficiencies for your staff and team as a part of this too, in selecting appropriate equipment that works together, because you're gonna be running this equipment again for another 20 years or so. And so we think this has great value overall in the process.
Will they be coming back with like a name or a firm for us at some time in the future?
Yes, so
they
this would
select?
be a firm that you would ultimately select and we'd bring back to you. Yep.
Appreciate it.
Additional questions? Hearing nothing further, the resolution authorizing Bolton and Mink to provide services for the selection of a construction manager at risk for biosolids improvements appears on pages 93 and 94 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Next up, adoption of a resolution awarding the bid for safe routes to school improvements.
Madam Mayor, this is in your packet, starting on page 95, I believe it is, 93 or 95. Jeff, are you going to help me out with this one? Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Let me get started while you're walking up. As you know, Madam Mayor and members, we've been talking about moving this project forward for quite some time. As you also know, due to historic and archaeological review, we had a couple of month hold on the activities. In addition to that, because of the timeline that we've seen related to when you were awarded funding and as we've moved forward with the bids, there's been quite a little bit of inflation within that time frame. And so we took a little bit of time, and Jeff and his team did some great work related to finding some additional resources for this. So I want to really thank Jeff and his team in looking for that. But Jeff, if you would explain a little bit about what this is, how much money we're looking to spend, and the other thing that I'd mentioned before I kind of cut Jeff loose on this is that this planning occurred almost 6 years ago now. And so the planning for this was done in cooperation with the school district. So as these areas were selected, it wasn't done in a vacuum. It was really done in cooperation with a number of partners, including the school district. So with that, I'd let Jeff talk about where and how and the money and all that kind of stuff, Jeff.
Okay,
Please.
thank you, Todd. Yeah, city council members, mayor, the funding for this project came from a grant application that the city put together and submitted through the ATP back in 2020 or so. But as Todd mentioned, the sidewalk improvements that are proposed come from a combination of things. Comes from the city's sidewalk master plan that had been prepared back in the 2016 era, somewhere in there, and some coordination with the school district. The project includes, the Safe Routes to School project includes the construction of about 1.5 miles of sidewalk throughout the city. If you believe it or not, there is that much room out there yet for sidewalk. Big part of it's on the east side of Washington Avenue between Chestnut and Sumner Streets, so that'll tie the southerly part of town, Broadway Avenue, everything north of there, Washington Avenue, to the middle school, or not the middle school, but North Elementary School, and then also the middle school. We also have it proposed on the east side of Church Street between Traverse Road and Woodland Street. That's along McGill Park, along the trail there. North side of Traverse Road between Church Street and McGill Place. That'll bring students down from the McGill Park area down to North Elementary School. And then we've got a piece going down to McGill Place there to tie into that sidewalk that's in the Gorman or the Governor's Heights subdivision, Lower Johnson, Upper Johnson in there. Moving to the south end of town, some sidewalk improvements are proposed on Jefferson Avenue between Valley View Road and South Washington Avenue. That'll tie the sidewalk that's currently there by Citizens Scholarship Foundation of America to the west there, down to South Elementary School on the south side of Jefferson Avenue. And then also, that'll go all the way down to Washington Avenue. There's a block of sidewalk there that'll also take construction or take place. And then last location is South 7th Street between Jefferson Avenue and South Elementary School. So that'll take sidewalk from the Jefferson Avenue intersection to South Elementary on the westerly side of the roadway. Currently, there's walk on the easterly side of the roadway. By putting it on the west side of the roadway, provides walk on both sides of 7th Street. As part of the project, we also included a raised median at Broadway Avenue, which is as you go up the hill from Washington, as you're going up the hill, you get to, not to the old, the first entrance where the beacons are, Lincoln Drive there, but the second entrance to the south, it would be, it's the middle school parking lot. So we're proposing to construct a median in there, just a small median that would provide a refuge for students that are walking from the north to the south and to school, to the middle school, and then back. So that's proposed as part of the improvements, and then also replacing those orange flashing circles or beacons as you're going up Broadway Avenue. Those are solar-powered beacons, and they've kind of lost their effectiveness, and they're not real noticeable. So as part of this project, we'll be constructing some rapid flashing rectangular beacons, and they're similar to the ones that you see at Jefferson Avenue by Gustavus, by the apartment or the buildings right across the street there. Again, near Citizen Scholarship Foundation on Jefferson Avenue. 5 bids were received, it looks like. Nielsen Concrete was our low bidder at $949,000. We had estimated about $780,000, as Todd mentioned, since 2019 when we prepared the application. Construction costs have gone up, most notably concrete, and then common excavation, I think, were the biggest differences we saw in our bid numbers versus what we were estimating. Overall, in the memo there's a breakdown of funding that is available to the city. This is a federal aid project, so the city's responsible for 80% of that funding, or excuse me, federal aid is responsible for 80% of the funding, and then the city is responsible for the match, a minimum match of 20%. So our grant dollars that we had available, we initially had about $450,584. That's not quite 80% of the low bid amount. And so we were able to gain another, or acquire another $303,000 of federal aid from some extra money that we had left over on our Old Minnesota Avenue St. Julian roundabout project. So working with MnDOT, we were able to utilize that extra federal funding that we had on that project, on this project. So overall, the federal portion of the project is $754,199. Municipal state aid will be about $188,549, and then there's a small local share in there. I think it's water related, about $6,400. So I guess with that, be happy to answer any questions. If you do award the project, they would likely begin just a portion of the construction this year in order to maintain our funding. We require the contractor to get a small portion of the project done this December, by the end of the year. But it sounds, according to what the contractor's saying, depending on weather, of course. The majority of this work will take place next year, only a small amount, like maybe fence removal, that sort of thing, just some minor things. Shouldn't impact the public.
Thank you. Questions? Dustin?
I was just gonna point out, for the people who may be paying attention for this project, so if I'm understanding it correctly, we're looking at a total project that's essentially $950,000, and the local taxpayers are being asked to pay $6,400.
Out of local dollars, correct?
Correct.
Yep, out
Okay.
of local city enterprise fund, yep.
Because that's a question that we get, is when we do these projects, how much of it are we paying with our property taxes?
Yep, that comes from, local share will come from, not only, not necessarily property taxes, but like the city's, water utility fund, I believe it is, or,
Yep.
so, but part of the utility rates.
Question on the beacon going up by the middle school, so is that gonna be hardwired versus solar powered?
Good question. There isn't, electricity right there, and we did investigate solar powered versus hardwired, and, it was determined that solar powered would be the best option for
Okay.
that location, so it would be solar powered, yes.
I guess my question is how long of a battery that has on it, just for I'm assuming it only flashes when activated, so that if it goes a few days without the sun shining, that there'll still be enough battery power for usage.
Exactly. The batteries on those, generally, I have in the back of my mind, they're about 5 years. I know city staff routinely changes them out just as a normal budgetary item, just to be safe. You know, I don't know if it's every 4 years or what, but we expect, at least what I'm expecting is to get at least 5 years out of them. Yeah.
This is not an unusual application of that type of equipment, used regularly in lots of places.
Dustin?
Has there been consideration of making the flashing lights on Grace Street the same? Because we have a very similar light now over by Gus Davis Crossing. We'll have a very similar light on Broadway, but the light on Grace is a different amber in setup.
Another good question, and I know we talked about that as part of this project. I just can't recall what the rationale was, why we didn't choose to do it as part of this. You catch me off guard there. I'm not 100% sure on that one. We did talk about it, though.
Okay.
If you don't mind, Mayor and members, we can look that up and get you an email in the next week as to
That
what
would
that's
absolutely-
about.
Suffice.
And it may be due to is, I know we looked at constructing sidewalk along the south side of Gray Street, and after we performed the topographical survey through there, it was almost, well, I shouldn't say nothing's impossible, but it was very, very challenging to get sidewalk in there just because the hill's so steep and the driveways are somewhat cut into the bank. So we originally were going to include that portion in the project, but we didn't in the end simply because it wasn't, I mean, you really couldn't do it without a lot of retaining wall. And then that could have been, being we were taking the sidewalk portion, that block of sidewalk out, we ended up maybe removing that crosswalk signal there too. So,
And Mayor, if I may, the resolution's included in your packet, and a parent low bidder, and the recommended bidder is Nelson Concrete LLC.
Any additional questions? Hearing none, the resolution, is there a motion to approve the resolution that appears on pages 97 through 98 of the packet?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Right.
Councilmember Weisenfeld,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Resolution is approved.
Thank you,
Thank you
Jeff.
very much.
Thank you.
Moving on, adoption of a resolution authorizing the purchase of a 2020 wood chipper and declaration of the 1988 wood chipper as surplus.
Mayor, members, Curtis is here if you have any very specific questions. As you'll see, Pete is not able to be here this evening, but this is the replacement of a wood chipper. This is used extensively and gets lots of hours during the spring and during the fall. You'll see this out taking materials from construction sites. We've had a lot of work that it's been used on related to emerald ash borer. And so the funding would come from the 2024 equipment certificate for about $42,500. The current wood chipper it's just at the end of life. It gets used hard. It's at the end of life, and so we need a replacement if we're going to continue to provide these types of services. Information's included in your packet with the resolution on page 100, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or discussion?
Do we have expected time of use for the 2020 wood chipper? I mean, how far into the life is 2,800 hours?
Curtis, if you wouldn't mind.
So I have talked to the forester a little bit about that, and he's very confident that, I mean, he's thinking maybe half, maybe. So if you look at the hours on our current one, the thing different is our current forester is a big proponent of wood chipping, where in the past he has not. There hasn't been that as much. His goal with it is he can do a lot more with a smaller crew. So this wood chipper essentially has a winch attached to it. So instead of, big log where you need a piece of machinery, essentially you can winch it, it'll drag it up to the machine, and it's got an arm that'll lift it up on the tray to chip it. So that's kind of his biggest goal for this one. In the past, to be able to use the chipper efficiently, you're talking 2 to 3 people kind of just to manhandle the stuff to get it to there.
I mean, I guess I just asked because, I mean, it seems like if we had the other one for almost 40 years and only put 2,200 hours on it, I mean, are we expecting, I figure we're not expecting this one to last 40 years, but.
I know the other one was not bought new either.
Oh, okay.
I think the other one, I think we've only had roughly 12-ish, if I'm remembering correctly.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I do not know how many hours were on that one when we got that one.
Okay.
And if I could, I'd remind the council that your utilization is higher than it's been in previous years and is likely to continue in that mode for a few years yet related to emerald ash borer.
I do know, when I was looking at a couple of them with Jake, the new machines, the same machine brand new was like 112 to 113,000.
Okay. Thanks, Curtis.
Additional questions? Thanks, Curtis. The resolution authorizing the purchase of a 2020 Vermeer wood chipper appears on page 100 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis?
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye. The resolution is approved. Next up, adoption of a resolution approving the completion of repairs on generator number 2 at the Broadway facility.
Mayor, members, the information is included in your packet along with the resolution. I think the memo itself provides a very good explanation of what staff and what Ziegler has tried to do to facilitate a repair, which was more cost-effective than this. But as it turns out, this is where we're at, and as you know, we're required under contract to be able to provide this. All the generators up there are important to your system, and each provides approximately 2 megawatts of additional backup power for you. And so the recommendation is to engage Ziegler at approximately $111,000 to facilitate the repair on generator 2. Happy to answer any additional questions that you might have. These are important units, and again, we're contractually obligated. The revenue stream that we have related to this entire generation facility is approximately $350,000 a year. So we not only have a contractual obligation, it is a moneymaker for you at this point. And so it continues to be important that we keep this operational, not just for backup reasons, not just for financial reasons, but because it works within your system and in the larger MISO system as a part of the generation capacity that SIMPA relies on.
Any questions? I mean, for folks at home, they might want to know a little bit more about that contract that we have.
Yeah, so the contract that we have currently, and it was entered into, if my recollection serves me well, approximately 2004, 2005. Essentially what happens is that SIMPA pays you what's called a capacity charge or capacity fee for the ability to generate 12 megawatts of power on an as requested basis. So that could happen when there's low voltage on the system someplace in the eastern part of Minnesota. It could happen based on a request through MISO, which MISO, I could talk for hours on this, but generally provides for the generation needs and regulation all the way from Minnesota down to Oklahoma and through the upper Midwest as well, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, and other areas. And so the contract states that we have to provide 12 megawatts, and if we don't, they don't have to pay us. though it has to be on demand with short notice. And that contract has essentially paid for the capital improvements in the capital building of the project. In addition, they provide all the fuel, but we're required to provide the maintenance on the project, and this is part of that maintenance.
Any questions? Hearing nothing, the resolution authorizing repairs to unit number 2 at the Broadway Generation Plant is on page 103 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye. The resolution is approved. Next up, a resolution allowing leash dogs and cats on certain city-owned property is authorized by City Code Section 8-83.
Mayor, members, information is included in your packet, and I would also mention that you've talked about this a number of times, as the Park and Recreation Board. You originally sent it to them for a recommendation back to you, and that's included in the first page of the memo, what their recommendation back was. As you had some additional discussion within your workshop and as staff reviewed the process to move this forward, we really believe that it's most appropriate that you continue with the process that's articulated as a part of your ordinance, which is, well, you don't have to change the entire ordinance, but by resolution, the city council can set parks where dogs and cats are allowed. And so that's really what's before you tonight, based on your commentary and discussion and direction to city staff. Probably the easiest way to go about this is to go to the resolution. The first resolution that you see in your packet is the previous resolution that was done in 2017 that expanded this from just dog parks to other locations. And so you'll see 6 potential locations there that were approved by the city council in May of 2017. The current resolution that's in front of you tonight for your potential action expands that even further. I would mention that specifically in item number 1, before you see the bullet points that lists off really all of your park facilities, tried very diligently to make sure that people understand the rules still need to be followed and that animals need to be under control, that they still are required to have rabies vaccination, and that waste cleanup is required. This would exclude animals from hard surface play areas. Think a basketball court or a tennis court as an example. It would exclude animals from areas underneath jungle gyms and playgrounds, wood chipped areas, fiber areas, areas that have P-rock. Those would be excluded as well around those play structures. And it would exclude them from fields that are used for organized play. An example of that might be a softball field or a soccer field. So this, although it provides opportunity for these animals to be in the parks, they are not to be on the field of play. They're really allowed, if I can use this terminology, in green spaces, not play spaces, as a part of this resolution. Happy to provide answers as best I can to any questions that you might have forward. The last thing that I'd mention is item number 2 as a part of the resolution, which indicates that this would become effective on January 1st, 2025. So it's not effective tomorrow. It wouldn't be through this fall. It would be effective in January of 2025. Part of that allows us a little bit of time to do some of the things that you've talked about, which are potential locations for additional waste receptacles and bagging facilities, those types of things, and some additional signage that might come along with this. This doesn't specifically state the rules related to signage. A little bit of that is included in your ordinance, but frankly, how we generally operate these is that we try and look logically at where we've seen utilization in the past, where we're going to see utilization, and try and provide signage as is appropriate. So there won't be 100 signs that show up every place. This will probably roll out slowly as we bump into challenges, questions about signage, or where we see additional utilization of pets by pet owners. Madam Mayor, again, happy to answer any questions that folks might have as best as I can.
Questions for Todd? Carrie?
From the list that's in the packet, are there any parks that are excluded, or does this encompass all
I
parks?
believe this encompasses all of the parks that you have in place. That's been your discussion. You've had a couple of changes over the past few years that I think have been included in there, including Hallett Park, and trying to think of the other one that's relatively new out in Traverse Green, Prairie Ridge. Thank you, Prairie Ridge Park. So, yeah, it even includes Jefferson Conservancy, which has been allowed in the past, and so hopefully I've hit the list well.
Okay. I just wanted to share just a little bit because my perspective has shifted from when we originally discussed this as a council. And I just wanted to explain why it's evolved for me. So it's based primarily on two factors. Allowing leash dogs in all parks won't necessarily impact the behavior of pet owners. I believe that there will still be the same number of irresponsible pet owners, so not necessarily an increase. But I have faith in our community that the responsible and considerate pet owners are in the majority. They should be given the opportunity to enjoy the parks with their leashed dogs. And I'm sorry, I'm not addressing cats. I've never met a cat that enjoyed being walked on a leash, but maybe they're out there. Opening all parks and with clearly designated no-dog zones, such as playgrounds and sports fields, can reduce confusion about where leash dogs are permitted. For example, we had previously discussed restricting access to Gorman Park, Vets Park. I think that creates more confusion about, well, which parks are allowed. So I'm glad that in our discussion it involved to include all parks. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who took the time to share their thoughts with me. Like many of you, I remain concerned about pet waste in our city parks. With the ordinance change, I would support an investment in additional trash bins and pet waste bag stations to make it easier for owners to clean up after their pets and dispose of waste properly. I'd also like to ask if the ordinance modification passes, that we just get an update within in approximately a year just to see how things are going, positive or negative. That I think that would be helpful for us as a council to evaluate how the change is working. And then I just wanted to do a shout out to the two dog parks that we do have. I am a dog auntie, and I take my friends' dogs to the dog park, the River Valley Dog Park Association dog park there, Thompson Park. And it's a community there, and that's where dogs just love to be running around unleashed. The dog owners chat, and it's just this little community there, and I just really appreciate the River Valley Dog Park Association and then Public Works for making that space so nice for our community to use. So if anyone's wondering where can I have my unleashed dogs, we've got two great spaces for that in our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, as is my usual practice, I do plan on voting no on this, and so I'd like people to know why. I'm voting against the resolution to allow dogs in parks because despite being a dog lover, prioritizing the comfort and safety of the significant number of humans who use these public spaces, I believe should take precedence over granting open access to dogs. I am especially concerned about the impact on children's ability to play freely in our parks. I will also note we have 2 dog parks and several other parks that currently allow dogs. And so I feel like we already have a good mix of pet accessible options in this city without making this change. I believe I'm in the minority on this vote, and so I'll close with a challenge to dog owners who bring their dogs to our parks. Please prove me wrong. Keep your dogs on leash, under control, clean up after them, and make sure your dog's presence doesn't make other people uncomfortable. I love dogs. Not everybody loves dogs. Your dog is not everybody's friend. And so while I may not agree with this resolution, I truly hope that responsible dog ownership will ensure a positive experience for everyone in our parks so that both dogs and people can continue to enjoy these shared spaces safely and respectfully. Brad?
So I'm really agnostic on this. I could go either way. I'm going to vote in favor of it. That's the way the public wants it. I want to note though that there is no change to requirements for dogs being on leashes, and I do think that is a problem in this community. Quite honestly, I regularly, when I go out for walks, I see people who don't have their dog. And yes, your dog may be well behaved, but all it takes is one squirrel to have that dog take off. And I'm a dog lover too. I mean, I love dogs, but I would never have let my dog go without a leash in a place like this. When you own 9 acres outside of Montgomery, then you can let your dog run. But that's what we have the dog parks for, exactly that. The unleashed playground we have both by the water treatment plant and across the river when it's not flooded. So I just encourage dog owners, remember that leash law, the leashes are required no matter what. Even outside of the parks.
Yep. Tustin?
Being on the Park and Rec Advisory Board, I've kind of been seeing this through since the beginning, and we got the survey feedback, and the community overwhelmingly wanted us to allow dogs on leashes. I will say Brad is 100% correct, and the concerns that have been echoed, virtually every person who had any opposition to dogs being in the park, it wasn't dogs on leashes. The concern was people letting their dogs roam around the park, and you don't know if that dog running around on the field next to you is friendly, or if they have a restraint or a means of that owner to restrict them. So I would like to point out that changing our rules on leash pets is one thing. And I would like all of the dog owners to know that we still do not allow dogs to be free rein in the parks.
May I ask for clarification
Sure.
on the survey that Councilmember Sharstrom is referring to? Can you remind the public what
I think
that
are we
survey
going
was?
back 2 years now? I think it has been that long. So when you went around to the parks and you saw the QR codes that were at all of the parks, the people were asked to provide feedback as part of our parks master plan that we've been putting through. And with the surveys that came back, there was an open-ended portion of the survey where people could provide feedback of changes they want. And allowing dogs on leashes was the number one item that was written in by people unprompted by the survey itself.
Well, there is one area that we all agree on. If dogs are going to be out in public, they need to be on a leash. So that's true now. It will be true January 1st when this change goes into effect. So keep your dogs on leashes. I love dogs. I want to see them safe, and they are safe on leashes. Any other questions or comments? Hearing nothing further, the resolution allowing leashed dogs and cats on certain city-owned property as authorized by City Code Section 8-83 appears on pages 107 through 108 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Weisenfeld.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
No.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Moving on to adoption of a resolution approving a cannabinoid products ordinance.
Mayor and members, the Assistant City Attorney, Steve Winkler, has been assigned and has worked on this and met with you on a number of occasions related to these changes that are driven by state legislative action a session or so ago. We want to make sure that you understand that the basis for this is that state statute as it's moved forward. I think it's also important to note that as this ordinance comes into effect, we will still be waiting for the state to finalize some of their rules and some of the processes related to the application process to have a license. There are 4 or 5 primary areas where cities have the ability to regulate. The rest of it is regulated by the state of Minnesota. This is not related to law enforcement, but again, the ordinance here is primarily related to the ability to sell at the retail level within the city of St. Peter. So with that, I'll hand the mic over to Steve. The other thing that I'd mention is that this was published according to the rules and state statute, and so this hasn't been available for the public more than the time required as a minimum under the state law. So Steve?
Thank you, Todd. You stole most of my preamble there, but I would just to sort of flesh out the issue a little bit further. It was in 2023 that the state of Minnesota passed Chapter 342 of the Minnesota statute, which regulates cannabis. And as Todd had indicated, this is largely a product of the now formed Office of Cannabis Management that is the big player in making rules, establishing policy, and exercising regulatory authority over the cannabis industry. Local government has some ability to regulate but not prohibit the industry that's burgeoning and going forward. In July of '24, the state began a pre-approval process for licensure of cannabis businesses, and then licensing is supposed to officially start at the beginning of 2025. So this ordinance that's proposed tonight would create Article 5 of Chapter 12 of the city ordinance, an additional article under the business regulation and licensing section of the ordinance, along with other issues like tobacco and the use of non-alcoholic beverages. It creates the ability for the city to create a local registration of cannabis businesses. Cannabis businesses would register through a similar process through the city clerk's office as obtaining other licenses here in the city. It creates reasonable restrictions to time, place, and manner. In this case, per your instruction, cannabis businesses would be able to be open from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., Sunday through Saturday. Places of business would be required to follow local zoning rules. The council, as indicated, has reviewed this proposed ordinance previously. The one addition that I added in the memo, if you've read it, and then also in the ordinance itself, regards temporary cannabis events. Previous versions did not contain any language on temporary cannabis events, simply because there's been little to no guidance from the Office of Cannabis Management on the state as to really how that should be regulated. After the council last reviewed the ordinance, I believe on August 5th, the Office of Cannabis Management disseminated a sort of model ordinance that my office reviewed. Having reviewed that model ordinance, it wasn't deemed that any other changes to the proposed ordinance were necessary, other than adding what I thought was some semi-helpful information on temporary cannabis events, and in particular, standards that the city can incorporate in regulating temporary cannabis events. And those are on page 117 of the packet. It's 12-186, and you can take a look at those. But other than those changes, the ordinance is consistent with what the panel has already reviewed. And I should say that those sort of standards for a temporary cannabis event are largely co-opted and sort of repurposed from other types of public events. For instance, rules that regarding the sale of alcohol in public events. They're taken almost exclusively from those types of sections of the city code as well. So that's really the only addition, and if there are any additional questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Can you give us an idea of what a temporary cannabis event might be in the city of St. Peter?
That is a good question, and I don't know if I have a very good answer. There's been a lot of conversations amongst city attorneys as to what exactly this could look like. But again, even through the model language that was provided by the Office of Cannabis Management here recently, it didn't really provide any indication of what appropriate standards for such an event would be, and I think that's largely because there hasn't been public cannabis events in the state, at least not legally, up until the drafting of this ordinance. So I think what is envisioned is, say,
like one of the let's say one of the music events that we have in town, we have the 3, says, okay, so we've got our liquor license, we are also going to
theoretically,
sell
so
cannabis?
theoretically, the say the Lions and Rotarians are selling beer out of a tent at Rock Bend Festival, there could be a similar setup or tent. Again, it would require the separate licensure and approval of the council in order to have your tent or booth that's also going to sell cannabis products at, say, Rock Bend or a similar type festival. But in theory, that could be something that's proposed. Someone could seek a license to do so, and then they would have to go through the steps to do that.
And one more scenario. So in theory, someone could, like the fireworks, in the grocery store parking lots, they sell fireworks out of there. If there was some type of pop-up, could those folks apply for a temporary event license?
Again, I think theoretically it's possible. That's not a scenario that I've seen discussed or in the conferences on the issue. That specific scenario hasn't come up. But in theory, yes, I suppose that could be something that could qualify as a cannabis event. I don't know.
I think, if I may, I think that is likely to be substantially different than the example that you provided, because in this instance, the example that you provided was fireworks sales in the parking lot at Hy-Vee or wherever. In this instance, they would still need a state license. For fireworks, they are not required to have a state license to be able to do that. So while that includes sales, I think this imagines something different than that.
I suspect it's gonna be the same thing that they do with the Delta 9 events in the cities, where it's like Cannabis Cup and like whatever days at breweries and things like that. That's my suspicion, is that it will just change from what they're already doing now with Delta 9 to recreational cannabis.
These would have to be held outdoors, is that correct, due to the Clean Air Act?
Yes, that's correct.
And we would have the ability to regulate these in our publicly owned property or park property if the board or the council so chose to regulate them, correct? You could regulate them out of your parks area, and they'd have to be on private type of property then?
For the sale issue, yes, but currently this ordinance does not address
I understand that.
usage.
Yeah, but
For sales.
you could,
Retail sales, you could, yes.
but you could also take it out of your parks if the council so chose to have an event like this. They could be prohibited in the parks.
Yes.
They could.
I mean, I know it's just how the laws are written now, but it seems like under, a lot of things are edible based in Minnesota right now. So I mean, these events don't necessarily have to be outside if they're like consumable,
That's-
non-smokable based.
Non-smokable,
events.
correct, yeah, but if
Yeah.
it's smokable, then it has to be
Sure,
outside.
of course. Yeah.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Other questions or discussion? Carrie?
Just want to say thank you to our Assistant City Attorney, Steve Winkler, for really diving into this content and state rules and how it's evolved and really helping guide us to make informed decisions. So thank you for all your work on this.
You're quite welcome.
Steve, if I could, just a couple points of clarification that this council discussed previously. The first of which is, and so you might want to keep the microphone for this one, which is, how many licenses are allowed under this? In some areas, and the law provides for the opportunity to restrict the number of licenses. How does this restrict that?
Right, so this does not specifically restrict the number of cannabis businesses in the city. The state statute allows you to restrict the number based on population. So while you could include language that would limit the number of retailers, this language does not do so. And that's always an issue that could be revisited by the council at any time if an amendment in that direction seemed appropriate.
Madam Mayor, if I can. Then the next one that I have, Steve, is we talked about having to follow land use rules, which is administered through the Community Development Office. And so, as an example, I live in Rock Ridge subdivision, which is a residential subdivision. If my neighbor wanted to open a cannabis sale location there, would they be allowed to do that? Or is it restricted in some other way that you could articulate here?
It's restricted through the existing zoning laws that exist, so it has to be, it's limited to an area where retail sales is already allowed. So at a residential address, they could not open a cannabis business.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Additional discussion or further questions? Hearing nothing, an ordinance amending St. Peter City Code, Chapter 12, Business Regulation and Licensing appears on pages 111 through 118 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sharpstreit.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld.
Aye.
The resolution is approved.
Madam Mayor, members, the other thing that I'd like to mention about this is that the way the state statute is set up is a substantial deviation from how liquor licensing works. In that liquor licensing is first controlled by the local unit of government and then the state of Minnesota. So if somebody applies for that liquor license, they're applying to the city of St. Peter, here in St. Peter. With cannabis, they first must apply through the Office of Cannabis Management of the state of Minnesota. And then we get a notice from them saying that there's been an application and they're going to approve that application. And the state is then asking us whether it meets the rules related to land use and other things, et cetera. So it'll look a little bit different as you see that going forward. I wanted to mention that because I think that's an important change in how the process comes forward. And so how we will be doing background checks will be somewhat different than you might see for the use of alcohol licensing. So anyway, I wanted to share that.
When does this ordinance go into effect, Todd?
We'll let Steve answer that one.
I believe we decided it would go into effect on January 1st of 2025.
All right, I was
Thank you.
wondering if it was the same as the dog.
Yep. Again, we are, no matter what date you might set, the ability for the state of Minnesota to issue licenses is up to them, and so we don't get to control that. The best estimates that we've seen, at least I've seen so far, has been the first quarter of 2025. So you'll have this in place in advance of when they are likely to issue license. That may mean that people are notified that they're going to be provided a license, but they might not actually have that license until the first quarter of 2025.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on.
I was really enjoying watching Todd.
Keeps him on his toes. Next up, adoption of a resolution approving the purchase of a rooftop HVAC system for Rivers Edge Hospital, and Paula is here to talk to us about that.
Mayor, council members, thank you for your time. Tonight I have three requests for your consideration, and I'll start with the rooftop unit. 20 years seems to be the magic number tonight. We have a rooftop unit that is original to the hospital, which is 20 years old. It has started leaking the Freon, which is now banned by EPA, and we are trying to be as polite to the environment as we can. So while we could fix it, it would be difficult to find the Freon to do that. This rooftop unit is rooftop unit number 3, which covers our lab and imaging departments. You might ask why we're looking at having a cooling and a humidifier system in the middle of winter when we're not going to need it to cool. It does require a 25 to 30 week lead time to build. And so requesting it now will give us time, hopefully, to have it ready for us to install before summer hits next year. We did get 3 different quotes for a 90-ton rooftop unit. You can see those on the memo. After the commission met, we actually received the lowest bid in from Schwickert's, so we would be requesting to replace the rooftop unit at the price of $488,415. And to pay for this, we would be financing rather than spending cash, and we would be looking to the city for an equipment certificate when the time comes to pay for that.
Thank you, Paula. Questions? Anything to add, Todd?
Just as always with purchases of this type, you have rules and ordinance related to what level Paula has to come and the commission has to come to ask for your approval. And this would be paid for out of hospital funds.
One thing, note, I'm not on the hospital commission anymore, but I do recommend the hospital commission consider the expected life of this when looking at the financing and not necessarily just settle for a 5-year equipment certificate based off of, you know, the size of this purchase, and you're replacing the last one after 20 years. I think to help the Manus Hospital's finances, probably at least a 10-year equipment certificate would be something you'd probably want to consider at this point.
Mayor and members, ultimately, that issue would have to come back to the city council for issuance, and I know Paula and her team, including Jake, are reviewing opportunities for that as we speak. Our goal isn't to do it right now, but a little bit later as we get closer to the installation and have that money available.
Thanks. Dustin?
Well, a question, and maybe this might sound naive, but I don't think since I've been on the council, we've actually done an equipment certificate for anything. How does that differ?
I'm going to defer to Todd on this one because I also have not done
Okay.
an equipment certificate.
So we have done this in the past. When the hospital was first occupied in 2004, 2005, actually, the city council issued, forgive my recollection, it's a little while ago, but approximately $390,000 for FF&E on the new facility. So this has been done. How does it differ? It really doesn't differ than how the city council might issue. In fact, this would be an issuance through the city council, and the hospital would be required to repay any debt and interest costs and issuance costs for this.
Okay, and I think that's important to note because typically when the public hears we're doing an equipment certificate, we are paying that in our annual budget, but this is being repaid by the hospital fund.
So this would show up in your financials as being a debt instrument, but then the revenue stream would be dedicated through the hospital. You have authority to take dollars out of the hospital fund, and so it's not just the commission's good graces to send you a check. You have the ability to grab those funds.
I'm on the hospital commission, and I think just the vast dollar amount that had my jaw on the floor just made it make more sense to pursue a financing option versus a cash purchase.
One of the things that we haven't talked about is there are 3 rooftop units that are the same age. So we have 2 more that we're hoping will, I know, they're smaller. They're smaller, would be less expensive, but they're not at end of life, they're not leaking. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to keep those moving along at least for a bit.
Are they full free on too?
Mm-hmm.
R22.
Mhm.
They're not as large. Yeah, they're smaller.
Additional questions for Paula or for Todd? Hearing none, the resolution approving the purchase and installation of a Train 90-ton rooftop HVAC unit for Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic appears on page 120 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. And next up, purchase of a new ambulance.
Item number 2 for consideration, and I'm going to give you a little background information. Currently, the hospital owns 2 trucks. We have 1801 and 1802. 1801 has been rechassied in the past. We have looked at the potential of rechassing that truck again, and the cost to do that would be $110,000. In addition to that remount and the new chassis, there's an electrical panel in the back of the truck that is outdated and would need to be updated to be functional, and that would cost an additional $40,000 to do that. 1802 is eligible for a rechassis or a remount of the box, and actually that falls under the amount that needs approval, that we can approve at the hospital. So we actually have approved, the hospital commission has approved a remount of 1802. And so we actually have ordered that last week, and that will be hopefully here before the end of the year, at least to start getting the work done on that. But what we're asking for is we'd like to add a new truck to the fleet. 1801 is eventually going to stop working, and we need to have at least 2 trucks. Our volumes continue to increase. The other thing that is important to note is that if we order the truck today, it's likely not going to be delivered until the fall of '26. So this is one of those decisions that isn't a speedy one. We have to make some plans and get that taken care of. We do not need to put any money down if we order that truck now. We've reinvigorated the hospital foundation to help. One of the focuses would be to raise funds. We've also asked for grant dollars locally. And we've applied for those already with the potential of receiving those, but we can't count on that. We actually have asked for the cost of both the truck that we're doing the remount on and a new truck. So, but you'll see the cost here. The truck itself is $312,996. There's a striker power load and power cot in the back, and that's really what prevents back injuries. It's an electric lift for the staff to be able to use to get patients into the truck without physically lifting them. The lift does it all. And then the graphics are going to come in at about $6,500. So the total amount of this truck would be $379,952, including the graphics and power load. It does not lock anything in. Actually, the cost has dropped since we initially started looking at this. There was a period of time where we couldn't even order an ambulance. There was not a window open to order. So that's a good question.
Additional questions for Paula?
How's this being paid for?
This is paid for by hospital funds. Again, hospital purchases of this size are required to come back to the city council for approval.
So we'll see this again in 2 years?
You have a capital.
No.
This was in there, correct?
Yes.
This is in their capital improvement plan for this year.
And we don't need to see it again because it's not going on an equipment certificate. If we
Correct.
approve this tonight, it won't come back to us.
Correct.
The other thing it will do, and I can just say 1801 right now will continue to use, and it will allow us to have a dedicated truck at events in town. And right now, we don't have that for some of the city events because those are trucks that are taking the runs. So if we have a third truck, that would allow us to be able to leave a dedicated truck.
All right, I'm not seeing any hands up. The resolution, The resolution approving purchase of a new ambulance for Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic appears on page 123 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Last item for Paula tonight, resolution.
But not leastly.
Resolution approving purchase of 53 IV pumps for Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic.
So thank you. As Mayor has stated, we are looking to replace 53 IV pumps. The purchase price is $147,095. $147,095, big numbers. We currently own the pumps that are in use. They were purchased in 2014 and 2015. We've also added a couple of refurbished models so that we could keep the same pumps across the facility and not have to have different tubing or different sets of rules to run those pumps. The pumps that we are currently looking at will be the Spectrum IQ, which will allow us a wireless interface to do two things. One, it will take information directly into the electronic patient record, but number two, it will allow our pharmacists to update the drug library on those just by making a change in the software without having to pull 53 pumps into the pharmacy and make those manual changes, which every time you do that creates an issue for safety. We did apply for and received a grant from the Minnesota Department of Health, and you'll see that at the bottom of the page. So again, the total price is $147,095. The grant from MDH is $115,845, which will leave $31,250 for Rivers Edge to pay.
Questions for Paula? Brad?
I'll just say, this is, I think this is great. It's like a hospital infomercial tonight. If you buy an AC unit, not only do we get an ambulance, but if we commit now, we also get 53 IV pumps.
Yes.
The only question is, can I get in 3 small monthly payments?
Yes, $29.95 will be paying for life. Right? I know.
That's why she put this
Save
one
the
last.
best for
That's why
last.
this one's last, so.
All right, I'm
sorry.
assuming no questions for Paula. The resolution approving purchase of 53 IV pumps has been distributed to all of us. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis?
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye. The resolution is approved.
Thank you very much.
Paula.
Thank you, Paula.
All right. Next up, adoption of a resolution approving the preliminary and final plats for Capital Loft 2. And Ben is here to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Mayor Noel and members of the council. This one starts on page 124 of your packet. So this is one memo or staff report for 3 action items. Capital Lofts was opened in May 2024, so not too long ago. It had 57 units. Due to its thoughtful design, amenities, and current demand for housing, the building filled rapidly. With the success of Capital Lofts and ongoing housing shortage, BRM is seeking approval to construct a new apartment building, which is Capital Lofts number 2. This will be located next to Phase 1, which is on the south side of Hallett Pond, or just southwest of Hy-Vee. This does fit one of the primary goals of the City Council, which is to provide a variety of housing options. The proposed building will be a 3-story tall building. It'll have a footprint of just under 10,000 square feet and host 25 apartment units. It'll also contain 10 attached garage stalls and 8 secured storage spaces. The zoning for this is C5, similar to Phase 1, and with that, a conditional use permit is required. The development regulations, as you see on the bottom of page 125, are all met. A plat, so a new plat, which is called Hallett Pond Addition Number 4, is required to allow the new building to meet all the development requirements without the need of a variance. The buildings will be spaced out according to the building code. The new plat or lot combination will allow for both apartment buildings, Phase 1 and 2, to be on the same parcel. The new apartment building will essentially be an extension of the existing structure, having a similar height, width, and exterior appearance. Referencing that conditional use permit, there were 17 standards that were met and reviewed by both the Planning Commission and the BZA. That was approved on September 24th. There is adequate access to utilities and road, electric, and stormwater at this site. And as far as off-street parking goes, the required is 123 stalls, with this as the combined units. And then the proposed is 125, so they actually have 2 more than needed. As far as trees go, they'll try to save as many trees as they can, but most of them were actually set around the site, so there shouldn't be too many that need to be replaced. Parkland dedication, so this was mostly fulfilled with Phase 1. A nearly 1-acre park was dedicated to the city on the north end, just south of Hallett Pond. That was named Hallett Park. Hallett Park was graded along with this project, filled with trees, trails, and sidewalks. In addition to the site work and land dedication, BRM Holdings will provide the city with $56,424.90, so as part of Phase 2, and this will help to fund the new playground equipment, shelter, and plantings at that park. There is a development agreement, the 3rd resolution here, that goes along with this as well, and this was recently signed by BRM Holdings. It does address the tax increment financing, the plat requirement, road utility access, parkland, construction and erosion control, design and lighting, and then a completion date. The proposed or projected timeline right now is approvals in September and October, and then final building official review and public works review in late October or early November, and then getting going on footings and foundation here either later this month or in November or early December. I think they hope to be done sometime later next year. Otherwise, what's attached is kind of a site map showing where the project is. There's 3 things to review tonight, 3 resolutions. So the first thing would be the preliminary plat, which is on 130. That shows how the whole site looks with the new building incorporated on the southeast side of it, which would be current lot 3 and then new lot 1. The cleaned up version of the final plat, and that resolution's on page 133. And then the development agreement, which is right after that on page 135. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, there's 3 action items tonight, so.
Thanks a lot. Questions for Ben? Brad?
So Ben, outside of the 10 additional attached parking, are we adding any other any off-street parking, or are we just using the existing lot that's there?
It'll all be contained off-street on the one new lot.
But we're not adding any more, correct?
We're not adding any more just the garage stalls. Yes, you're right.
So people who are concerned about us paving over to add more parking, we're not actually doing that.
Correct, yeah.
Additional questions? Hearing nothing, we're gonna go on our first item, the Hallett Pond Edition number 4 preliminary plat for Capital Lots 2 project, which is on pages 130 and 131 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Do you have anything to add before we consider the final plat? All right. Hallett Pond Edition number 4 final plat Capital Lots 2 project is on pages 133 through 134 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Weisenfeld,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Moving on to the development agreement. Anything to add before we consider that?
No.
All right, and questions for Ben? The resolution adopting a development agreement between BRM Holdings LLC and the City of St. Peter, Hallett Pond Edition number 4, 960 North 3rd Street, Capital Office 2 is on pages 142 through 143 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld.
Aye.
Resolution is approved, and you are not off the hook yet, Ben, because we're gonna talk about a loan extension request.
All right, thank you, Mayor Noel and members of the council. The Tanis Brothers loan, which was issued in 2014, is for 309 South Minnesota Avenue. And this is the Comfort Systems building in the downtown. And the manager is Patrick Tanis, along with his father and brother. This particular property was hit by the tornado. The upstairs was left vacant and kind of messed up and unclean for quite a while. They took it over, and they got financing from the city and from a local bank, and used some of their own funds to renovate approximately $120,000 worth of the upstairs into 2 really nice apartments. So with that, in their 10-year review, that was up this September, the EDA took a look at that, and the Tanis Brothers actually requested 2 things. One, would the EDA consider just extending the current loan by six months? That's when their bank loan would be up. And then the other was to extend it 5 years and then just use updated terms. So the EDA and the EDA Loan Review Committee both looked at this, and with the capacity that we have in our revolving loan fund, they actually thought option 2 was a better deal for the city and for the applicant. So with that, the EDA approved option 2, which would be a new 5-year loan extension. This would be going from 3% to 6%, approximately $40 more a month. It would be reviewed again in 5 years. So with that, if it was approved, Like with any loan that we issue, we ask for a personal guarantee, a mortgage, and life insurance. So with that, it would be staff's and the EDA's recommendation to approve this new loan extension, which is at 309 South Minnesota Avenue for Tanis Brothers. That resolution's on page 147.
Any questions for Ben or Carrie? Brad, you're on the EDA. Anything to add?
The only thing I might add is to note with the interest, this is the interest that we actually use for our accessibility grants in the that we typically do early in the year, or well, I guess we do it around the springtime. So in the end, if we didn't extend this, then that would actually decrease the amount of money available for that grant program. Obviously, they're good tenants. They've paid on, or good tenants. They're good borrowers. They've paid on time, and we have the ability to do it. It passed the EDA easily.
Okay.
There's 2 residential units in this?
Correct, yes.
Any additional questions? Hearing nothing further, the resolution approving a revolving loan extension in the amount of $33,169.73 to Tanis Brothers LLC to partially finance the 2014 renovation improvements at 309 South Minnesota Avenue appears on pages 147 through 148 of the package. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Thank you, Ben. We are moving on to reports. I have no report tonight. Are there any, I know we have at least one council member who'd like to make a report. Carrie?
Yes, I just was going to report on the RETA annual meeting. RETA stands for Regional Economic Development Alliance, and St. Peter is a partner. And so the annual meeting is an opportunity to celebrate the work of the partnership in regional economic development efforts. We believe that we can make a bigger impact when we pool our resources and expertise together. And so it really is a celebration, but we also, there's an opportunity to network, to hear presentations, which are always really great. But this year we had plenty of council members attend. So Councilmember Sharstrom, Councilmember DeVos, Councilmember Pettis, and an EDA, our newest EDA member, Corey Johnson, also attended. So it was a great turnout. There were 105 people that attended, and that's a record turnout. So it was a very successful event. And I don't know if others who are there want to share anything, but that's my report.
Nothing to add. Are any other reports? All right. Thank you very much, Carrie, for attending and for serving on RETA as well. Reports from the city administrator.
Mayor members, I just wanted to make mention of the fire station anniversary. The grand opening will be a year, a few days from now. And so there's, we would hope for no utilization of the facility, that there was never a fire or a need for emergency service, but unfortunately there is. And so we're very lucky to have that facility, which I think has been well received, not only by the fire department, but by the community and surrounding communities as well. Madam Mayor, that's the only report that I have for you for this evening. But I do have a request for closed session to discuss 2 potential real estate transactions. Technically, these would be 2 separate closed sessions. First of all, would be for the North Industrial Park Subdivision 3. And then second would be discussion on Scholarship Way, located at 1 Scholarship Way, the Scholarship America Building and Grounds.
The resolution calling for a closed session does appear in the packet. Are there any questions, or is there a motion to approve the resolution?
If I could, Madam Mayor, before anyone makes a resolution, I would expect to come back into open session only to adjourn. I do not expect any action after those closed sessions, so again, only to adjourn.
And so we will go downstairs
Yes.
to the Travis Jessu room. All right, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Weisenfeld,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. It is 8:31 PM. We will move into closed
Finally hit the
session.
threshold where you needed a sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Open and close, 2 times.